Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Well, here we go again. To steal a Yogi Berra quote, it's like deja vu all over again, because today's news was all about acting like this variant, maybe you've heard of it, this Omicron, this Omicron variant. It's spreading. COVID, have you heard? It's surging a little bit. It's getting worse. One expert said viral blizzard. Heading into a viral blizzard, which is weird because, experts have been saying for the longest time, get ready. We're heading into a time when things are going to get worse. Keep your eye on the ball, that kind of stuff. Things are going to get bad. I've got my expert who keeps telling me, take a look at this. Late January, February, bad. Maybe wear the damn mask every once in a while. Maybe wash the hands before picking your behind and scratching your nose if that's your thing. Do the social distance. Duh. How about we do that? No. We're not going to do it because we're Americans, damn it. And as Winston Churchill once said, Americans always do the right thing after doing everything else first. So clearly we're going to have to do everything else first, thin the herd, and then maybe we've got a chance. And that, I fear, down the road. Now, New York has reported its highest COVID daily numbers on record. They say over 21,000 new cases on Friday. That surpasses their previous single-day high from January. And again, from what we're being told, it's going to increase quickly because this Omicron is much more contagious. And now they're saying, because if you remember, they're saying, well, it's not as deadly. Now they're kind of pulling back. I'm not so sure. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll see. Now, New York City is going to begin fining businesses $1,000 if they don't comply with the COVID vaccine. That will begin after Christmas. Get your Christmas spreader events done. That will be December 27th. And according to the stories, the city will escalate fines and penalties if violations continue. Go to Ohio. Some good news coming out of Ohio. Evidently, things are bad there. In fact, so bad that 1 out of every 5 patients in a hospital right now are COVID patients. They're at capacity. They've announced that they're going to call up over 1,000 National Guard troops, and they will be dispatched to hospitals. Yes. And of the over 1,000 people that they're going to call up, about 150 of them are actually trained into do anything medical. So the rest will be, I guess, pushing people around, cleaning bedpans, washing stuff, but need it. And I couldn't help as I'm reading all these stories from all across the country of how things are getting worse and going to get worse. We know it's going to happen because we're Americans. We've got to do everything wrong first. I couldn't help but be thankful that the Republicans in my state decided that it was a good idea to sue Governor Wolf over the mask mandates for kids in school. Just in time for the next COVID rager. Because hey, what says Christmas like? Hey, let's have a big super spreader event. Now the Biden administration has come out with this idea that because he can't shut anything down, there will be a full-fledged revolt. And this is what the moneyed interests and the anti-vaxxers and the Trump pansies want. They want the conflict. So schools can't close at this point, even though some are. Can't come from the federal government. They've unveiled what they're calling a test-to-stay strategy, which means they're going to start testing kids. You got it. You got to go home. If you don't have it, you come to school. Not a bad idea unless you don't have enough tests. I, as you can tell, not feeling very well. Thought potentially I may have contracted COVID after my my adventure on Monday, sitting in a hospital for 8 hours, where they had that magic barrier, the sign that said, COVID, don't come past this point. Kind of like the old the smoking and non-smoking sections. Same thing. So I thought, there's a possibility that's where I got it. Finding a test was not easy. Getting an appointment, not easy. But I did it. I got it. And fortunately, it was negative. But you can't find a rapid test in any store, anywhere near any store. In fact, one guy, and I'm a little hurt by this. One guy didn't actually tell me no. He just laughed at me before he hung up. So I guess they're getting a lot of this, and that is the response. Just a chuckle and a click, because that's what I got. Now, some good news. Canada, seeing how well we've handled the COVID situation, they're set to reimpose their border testing for travelers returning to Canada. That's going to start on December 21st. They're going to have to show proof of a negative PCR test to get back in. They can leave, but they can't get back in. And you got to go, wow, that was quick. Because if you remember, Canada eased their testing requirements all the way back on November 30th. So I guess we were big boys and girls for not quite a month. But hey, it's something. It's something. And like I said, deja vu all over again, because the NFL, once again, is rescheduling football games. I was looking forward to the Browns playing on Saturday. That's not going to happen. The Browns have been hit hard. I think in excess of 20 players. They're rescheduling the Saturday game to Monday against the Raiders. And the Rams, Seahawks, Washington football team, Eagles, they're going to move from Sunday to Tuesday because, according to reports between the Browns, the Rams, and the Washington football team, 68 players are on COVID restriction. 68. And you go, what? I guess, maybe we're not, maybe. Now, my anti-vax friends are going to go, well, see, vaccine doesn't work. If one of them dies, then I might agree with you. Chances are they're just going to be contagious, and you want to keep them away from people. You don't want it spreading to all of the dimwits who didn't get, and there's a very small number of those. But yeah, so good there. Also, some interesting news. Federal Appeals Court reinstated the Biden vaccine mandate, because if you remember, I think it was last month, you had that decision from the court down in New Orleans that overturned it. This court decision, the Sixth Circuit, they said, no, we're going to reinstate it. They believe that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration has the authority, has the historical precedent for using wide discretion to keep people safe on the job. They point out that this is something that is a pervasive danger in the workplace, and that particularly it's a danger for unvaccinated workers. So here's the weird part. This is the weird little part in all this. OSHA is going to these extreme measures to protect the stupid people. And this is the part that's really kind of ironic, is because, I've been calling for OSHA to step forward and do something since, March 13th of 2020. Going, hey, this is your job. This is what you're supposed to be doing. How about we do it? And now they step forward and do it. And, you've got all of these employer groups. You've got the Restaurant Association. You've got, you go down the list. You've got all of these moneyed interests who are trying to fight this back. The American Trucking Association, National Federation of Independent Business, the lobby group for the moneyed interests, the low-wage workforce. They not happy because, hey, this is burdensome. It's burdensome on employers to make sure that their workers are safe. Understand what these groups are saying. It's a burden on the employer to keep their workforce safe. Because, at this moment, there's no real consequence. If you go, fine. You don't have to make sure they're vaccinated. But if they contract COVID, well, you know what? They get to file a workers' comp claim. Then I think the tune would change, because right now there are no consequences for them. They don't want to be here. And as I've been saying from the beginning, our government cannot deal with this. This is something that capitalism will have to deal with. And this is how this begins, by putting regulations in place that make employers go, well, I should probably protect my workforce. Now, understand, with what's coming, I guess this is reinstating that January 4th deadline for everyone to either be fully vaccinated or to submit to COVID testing. By December 5th, everyone was supposed to be wearing masks. I guess they're going back to that, so that can happen. I'm interested to see where this goes next, because I don't think it's going to end. It will have to get to the Supreme Court, and I guess they're going to have to decide on this. I don't know. So we'll see where this goes. The Justice Department, I thought, had a great argument. They said that the threat to human life and health vastly outweighs petitioners' guesswork about the number of workers who may quit rather than get vaccinated or tested. They argue that, hey, once there's a mandate there, they're gonna get the vaccine, and we're seeing this in the military, where if you remember all the TikTok videos and all the social media, I'm gonna leave the military. You're talking maybe 100 from each branch, like not even a very small amount, and you go, okay, good luck. Now there are some, and you go, good luck. You've made your choice. Everyone gets a choice. No one held you down. Now, interestingly enough, this is where, talking with my military friends, I didn't really think you had a choice, because according to my one buddy, he's like, you didn't know what you were getting hit with. You've been vaccinated 100 different times in 100 different ways, and you had no say about it. Why is this different? Well, because it's a political issue. And this is a political statement. It's not about the vaccine. It is just what it is. So, going to be interesting to see, again, the growth of this new variant. The hospitals are already full in a lot of areas, and it's going to get more interesting as the days get longer. And as Marsha Blackburn, the senator from Tennessee, said, she, during this holiday season, is going to be meeting with her family and singing and all of that stuff. And Dr. Fauci can't tell her no. Well, I hope they're unvaccinated, because maybe we don't have them around for next Christmas. I know, that's so cruel, isn't it? Kind of is. Some good news, though. I think the Biden administration realizes their Build Back Better plan is dead on arrival, at least this year anyway. And they're refocusing the idea onto voting rights, something we desperately need to get done, and quickly. And I like what Pastor Raphael Warnock had, Senator Raphael Warnock, he's also a pastor, what he had to say. He said, let me be very, very clear. If the Senate can change the rules to fix the debt ceiling, it must do the same to save our democracy. We need to protect the rights to vote, the right to vote nationwide. And I'm in this spot. I'm in the spot of just get rid of the filibuster altogether. Let the democratic process play out. This idea that, we have to be very careful. No. What this does is this gives the Senate the ability to not do their job. If conservatives truly believe that destroying Social Security is the way forward, and they have a plan better, I would love to see them feel the wrath of the voting public if they ever did try that. And this is why they can always go, we're for it, knowing that there will always be a filibuster in place. This is why we can't have nice things. This is why we can't do the right stuff, because, we've got this arcane rule in the Senate. And there are a number of people who are coming out finally and saying, we need to get through it. In fact, Democratic Senator from Colorado, John Hickenlooper, is out saying, we got to at least change the filibuster for the voting rights legislation. Now, you look at some of the candidates for U.S. Senate, like John Fetterman here in Pennsylvania, the lieutenant governor, saying, look, it's incumbent on us as a party to use the opportunities we have. And this is what the opportunity we have. Change the filibuster, get the stuff that needs to get done. You've got the lieutenant governor who's running for Senate in Wisconsin. Kind of the same thing. Eliminating the filibuster means passing voting rights legislation, getting something done. down the line. You also have the person who's running in North Carolina, this Sherry Beasley, saying pretty much the same thing. She called it a tool of gridlock, which stops and prohibits the passage of the kind of legislation the majority of the American people support. And I've been saying this for a long time. The things that we want, we never get because, well, the upper chamber knows better. They know better. You can't ask for too much. And this is the problem I have with where we are. Nothing gets done, so it's easy to then turn on each other, when the anger really should be at the politicians who aren't getting the things we want. Healthcare is one of those issues that, regardless of which party you're talking to, people want. Now, it's one of those things where you go, yeah, we all want healthcare. It's a matter of where you draw it, how you get access to it. But everybody wants it. Everybody wants to make sure that if they get sick, that they're going to be covered, that their children get hurt, that they're not going to go bankrupt, that they're not going to have to fight with insurance companies if they're getting sick. They want time to heal. Same thing with paid leave. People want paid leave programs overwhelmingly. And the sad reality is, look, I'm someone who says this is how we get paid leave through our unions. We fight for it in the workplace. Sadly, we can't get strong worker protections in this country. So the only way to get paid leave is through legislation. This is the kind of situation we get put in time and time again because our Senate is so dysfunctional. And it's dysfunctional for a reason. And that reason is it always seems to benefit the moneyed interest. It always seems to benefit those who control the levers of power and our big corporations. Because they always seem to get what they want. I mean, you look at the last guy, the former administration, they passed one piece of legislation, a giant handout to basically a welfare bill for billionaires. That's where their priority was. Didn't do anything for you or me. Sorry, didn't see it. But we got some lip service because it's all about how bad the other side is. And as I say all the time, it's not about right and left. It's not about Democrat and Republican. It's about up and down. It's about the wealthy versus the rest of us. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Max Byrne's going to be here, columnist over at the Daily Beast. He's got a new piece out on workers, especially young workers, and their push to organize. Quick break, right back with Max.
The good news is America is coming back. More jobs, more building, more of what makes our country great. And more cities and towns, more small businesses and big corporations are choosing the highly skilled, highly trained members of the IBEW to do the work. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers is committed to doing the job right, on time, and safely. America is making a big comeback, and the IBEW is proud to do our part.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
There are some days where I got to tell you, I really hate Democrats. It doesn't happen often, but there are some days where you go, are you kidding me? Roll up your little digits. Get in there, throw a couple of punches. Don't just offer to hold somebody's coat. Get in there and mix it up. Or, at least, not run away. And I'm looking at Virginia going, what exactly are you doing? You're literally days away from losing control of the legislative body and the governor's mansion. You have opportunities to do some really quick stuff. Oh, I don't know, like, something on that whole abortion front that, the majority of women in this country want their reproductive rights protected. You could have done something there. And it's not that the Democrats didn't want to do something. No, they just had vacation plans. They couldn't change the airline tickets. They're non-refundable. How freaking crazy is that? And this is why sometimes I hate Democrats. And here to share maybe in my anger and misery, I've asked our good friend Max Byrne to come talk with us. Max is a columnist over at the Daily Beast. He's got a new piece out that I think is really important. I hope folks will take a look at, all about what's going on with young folks and organized labor. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So am I going too far with this? There are times I hate the Democratic Party. Am I going too far with this?
I mean, I don't hate the Democrats, but I'm certainly getting awfully frustrated with them. I think this Virginia situation, especially for me as a former Virginian, is disheartening. I mean, this was a real opportunity to codify Roe versus Wade into law, as New York has done. And we know that this is under attack in the courts. And we know, as we've talked about, that it's a popular issue even among Republicans. But this lack of political will is really what's dooming Democrats and is to blame for a lot of their sagging popularity.
And it's not just this for me. I've been angry. Maybe it's just Virginia Democrats I'm angry with, because they've had control for a little while and have done nothing to repeal the state's right to work laws, which I think they should have done immediately. That should have been day one, but they chose not to.
Yeah, there was certainly an ambitious agenda laid out, not dissimilar to the sort of very ambitious agenda Joe Biden laid out in 2020. But there's always been a sense of not overreaching, of wanting to play to the middle, to not do big signature things that will alienate voters. But Democrats struggle to remember that those big signature things also win voters, that voters won't vote for a party that isn't inspiring, that isn't passing things, and isn't selling their story. So Democrats played nice, didn't make waves in Virginia, and now everybody's wondering what could have been.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you just go, something has to be done. When you have the moment, and this is where when Democrats have power, they got to learn how to use it. And I look at this last year. I mean, the last 11 months in a couple of days, had some power, had the ability to get some stuff done. Got some stuff. I'm not gonna diminish the rescue plan and the infrastructure bill and that stuff. I'm not gonna diminish that. But you had an opportunity to make some really good transformative changes, and there's always one that stubs your toe.
Yeah, and Democrats are burned by this, Joe Biden especially, because he promised very ambitious things on the campaign trail. He didn't say, vote for me, we're going to pass COVID stimulus funds, and then we're going to try and just hold this ship together and keep it from falling apart at the seams into a civil war. He promised, universal pre-K. He promised the most aggressive climate spending in history. He promised immigration reform. These are all things now that if Democrats talk about them at all, it's with a note of defeat in their voice.
Yeah. Now you've got a new piece out, the left-wing cause that Democrats are scared to embrace. And, I go back to, through my lifetime, labor has always been the thing that Democrats have taken for granted. During election time, they always speak nice. They always come to the Union Hall and say wonderful things, all the things they're going to do. I remember the only reason I voted for Bill Clinton was because he promised to pass a strike replacement bill that eventually Bob Dole ended up filibustering, and then it just ended up dying. I shook Barack Obama's hand twice, and twice he promised me we were getting something better than the Employee Free Choice Act. Got nothing. So the rhetoric is always there. The action falls way short. Now, Joe Biden, everyone's saying, including me, this is the most pro-union president of my lifetime. He's taken some solid, concrete actions that others haven't. But we just can't seem to get that legislation that we need. And I think younger people, are tired of putting up with it. And I'm hoping we see a little more militancy out of them than we have out of my generation and out of the millennials.
I don't think we'll have to wait long. I mean, if you watch Gen Z, these are people who, as Jordan Zakarin said, have grown up seeing their friends get shot in school, have watched recessions, have watched income concentrate at the top, have watched government mishandle pandemics. They're not in the mood to give this system more legitimacy. They want structural change. And they're proving, just as they did in politics, that their use of technology is running ahead of the businesses and the corporations trying to stop them. And it's creating some really interesting dynamics where small groups of young people can essentially take down Kellogg's ability to hire scab workers by attacking their online job forums. And Kellogg's never considered that, had no response to it, and ultimately they threatened to have them arrested, which is laughable. But it shows you how easy it is to use these new tactics to really change the game for labor.
Yeah, and look, as you've said, these kids have seen all of this stuff, and some people who argue every generation goes through some bit of that. But you're right; it's a little bit more magnified when you look at the social media, where everything is happening in real time. Whereas in years past, there was always something of a delay and something that you could get away from. Now there's no denying or getting away from it.
No, and it's surprising to me because these young people, by and large, don't have parents that were in unions. They don't know anybody personally who's in a union. They've certainly never been a member of one themselves, but they're listening to people like Bernie Sanders. They're singing union hymns at rallies in 2021 that Woody Guthrie was singing. It's an amazing level of camaraderie, and it comes from the acknowledgement that the decline of unions in this country led to a decline in the middle class, and that the only way to fight back against corporations who are now more powerful than they were by far than when unions were first formed is to reform and re-strengthen unions and fight back.
And then for me, the number one thing, and the reason that I believe, having a strong labor movement and high union density is you create empowered workers. You can create educated, active, engaged workers who on the job demand better, and they take those demands into the public space as well. So if you have those, and this is where I've talked to people that I don't understand complacency. I don't understand, well, there's nothing I can do about it. City Hall always wins because, look, I've always had a union job. I've always had the belief that I can change things. And that's not just in the workplace. That's in society as a whole. But I do believe that comes back to the fact that I've always had a union job that's always given me the protection to make my decisions and a union that would back me over it.
And the fire is there. I mean, for young people, they're in the streets, they're helping picket lines, they're organizing digitally. They're being let down by a Democratic Party that has not yet figured out how to message this to voters, even though this is in a lot of ways their fundamental foundational issue. And, 1 week we're talking numbers, 11 trillion, 3 trillion, all, the number of jobs we're creating. The next week we're trying to make human stories about how these things impact people, but never committing to any course of action. And the end result is most Americans have no idea that this is a historically active year for labor.
Yeah. So, here's the thing. You as a Democratic strategist, this has got to be driving you insane because there doesn't seem to be a coherent, cogent message. There doesn't seem to be any plan here. It seems like the spaghetti theory, but only with cold spaghetti.
Yeah, it's in a way, Democrats are still feeling out sort of what they want their 2022 issues to be, with the end result that they're not making an especially consistent or compelling case on any of them. And it's frustrating because I'm excited about being a Democrat. I believe in what we stand for. I know when we fight for those things that we win. And to have Joe Biden, one of, even Republicans I think would agree, one of the best one-to-one humanizing communicators to ever hold this office, who understands so deeply what it means to be in a union beyond just having a good job. And to have him not giving an Oval Office speech highlighting John Deere and Kellogg's and all these unions, not really making this a big priority beyond an occasional stump speech, really just sort of leaves people to fight for themselves at a time when we should be arm in arm, literally.
Well, let me ask you this. I've actually taken the position that I don't know that I want Joe Biden giving these kind of presentations because he's not very good at it. These prepared speeches, these things, it's not in his wheelhouse. His wheelhouse is getting out there, shaking hands, interacting with people, being Uncle Joe. He does have a stutter problem. He clearly a vision problem at a certain level because you're reading off teleprompters. I prefer him out in those spontaneous moments. The rest of his administration should be the ones who are out there pushing a solid message. This is where Kamala Harris could come into handy, I think, on some level.
That's a great point. And especially because if you look just today, Bernie Sanders was in Battle Creek on the picket line with Kellogg's workers, who, by the way, are about to be greatly ripped off. There is a memo leaked from Kellogg management just a few minutes ago that mentioned that there may be a tentative deal, but that management shouldn't worry. It gives the workers nothing, and they won't last another 3 weeks. So let's push them on this now. That has gone uncommented on, because if you look at the Democratic Party's Twitter feed, they're talking about whether Kamala Harris is popular or not, and why the media is wrong about this. And it is such a Beltway insider fight that nobody cares about except Politico and Beltway magazines. And meanwhile, these huge labor actions that we have the power to amplify and fight for are going completely uncommented on by the people we've elected to defend labor.
No, you're spot on. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Max Burns. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. You can take a look at his piece, The Left-Wing Cause that Democrats are scared to embrace, over there at dailybeast.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can check this out. You know, going back to when you were talking about young people embracing the labor movement and embracing, you know, that legacy of the past. The one thing that I find most important, and this is where Democrats, I don't think, understand as well as they should, the grassroots nature of labor, that everything's local, everything's immediate. You can be directly involved in something, you can directly influence it, and you can directly see results of it all right in a local community. And I think that's something that Democrats have to get their heads around. And I think Bernie Sanders understands this, which is why you see him at Kellogg's and other places supporting striking workers. I mean, I've walked the picket line with him when Verizon was on strike. This is a guy who understands that grassroots kind of, we've got to support workers no matter what. And I think Democrats have lost that.
They have. And it's a shame, because this is an issue that unites a party that is in need of some unity. Like, we focus so heavily on what divides the Democrats this year that you never know that the PRO Act, this pro-labor union act, unites Bernie Sanders on the left and Joe Manchin on the right. They both want to get it passed. They've both been working aggressively to try and win over Republicans. That's not going to happen. But unfortunately, Joe Manchin doesn't believe in ending the filibuster. But the point is, you know, there's only one group that's out on the road organizing and having these rallies, and that's Bernie Sanders aligned groups. You can't get Joe Manchin or Chuck Schumer out to a labor rally with coherent messaging. And I don't understand how, once again, we are largely remaining silent when voters who've supported us for generations are in dire need of help. And without that amplification, these are just going to be local fights that management can divide and conquer. They need a strong ally behind them.
Yeah, what do you think of the argument? Because there's a couple of arguments that are going on with some people I know in labor that, you know, there's this view that union members are, you know, just overwhelmingly white males, and that Democrats have written off white males, you know, basically just written us off completely because we're not the future of the Democratic Party, or so the argument goes, when in reality the fastest growing segment of the labor unions movement are black women. But don't let facts get in the way of reality. What do you say to that argument that, you know, that's part of why this hasn't really become a central issue? Is, you know, they're looking at the tea leaves of the electoral votes structure and figuring out who's going to benefit them in the next election.
Yeah, I think it runs even deeper. It's just that Democrats have largely lost touch with labor as labor has declined. That a lot of Democrats, you've seen, not to get too in the weeds, but you've seen sort of a realignment over the last 25 years away from organized labor and industrial workers as a base of the party to these sort of urban techno people. You've Silicon Valley, Pittsburgh, places like that were labor and are now being rebuilt into sort of tech hubs.
Yeah, but what's interesting,
Democrats
Max,
are going after them.
What's interesting there is they seem to be now growing and organizing where nobody ever thought they would, because guess what? They're being abused just as much, if not more, than somebody working in a factory or in the coal mines.
And that's exactly what a lot of progressives were saying years ago, that this will reach a point where these people will have the mass to actually organize. And we're going to wish that we had kept those close relationships and kept supporting those unions, because that institutional knowledge is lost. And union memberships promote active citizens, and active citizens are less likely to be Republican citizens. Just the statistical truth. But in this chase for the latest new demographic, we've really failed to make those that built us feel the love and feel respected.
Yeah, last question I got real quick. We're looking at this Build Back Better plan, which, again, I think could be a huge help in resetting bad policy over the last 40 years. Is it smart to give up on this at this point, or do you see this as something that they'll revisit in the new year and possibly get passed?
Well, they can't give it up, because that would be an admission of defeat that I don't think the administration wants to take right now and would hang over the 2022 election. That said, Build Back Better is losing weight at an alarming rate. Things are being chipped out. If Joe Manchin gets his way, a child tax credit will be essentially the only thing in the bill. It would go down to about $1.5 trillion and cut out everything that progressives want. At this point, the longer that bill sits, the less likely it is to pass. And it's questionable whether it's even going to have the support to restart this fight next year.
Yeah, I said if it doesn't get it done by March, consider it done. I'm not, my friend Bob Ney says May. We agreed on maybe April. But if you don't get it done early, it isn't going to happen. But Max, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff. I look forward to having you back on again real soon.
Anytime. Thanks.
Good stuff. Our good friend Max Burns. Make sure you check out his work over at the Daily Beast. We'll get links out to his most recent article on labor. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around to listen to The Rick Smith Show.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing, because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage. Was real difficult to make a living. And the Teamsters pushed a lot, so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind, the union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So potentially some good news coming out of Kellogg. Potentially, Max Byrne kind of alluded to some of it, but what I'm looking at doesn't seem horrible. It's going to come back to what the actual language on the two-tier wage system is going to be. Are they getting rid of that two-tier wage structure and making the time to top rate shorter? It's all, I haven't seen the language, don't know. But from what I'm hearing, potentially, this could be an end. I'm not jumping out on a ledge saying, oh, this is great. There is a tentative agreement. We will see what the actual language is. Some really good news, though, coming out of Worcester, Massachusetts. The nurses at St. Vincent's Hospital, they have a tentative agreement with Tenet Healthcare, brokered by Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh, which means the agreement that they already agreed to, that will be in place, but all of the nurses will be back with their jobs, with their seniority, none of this stuff of replacing them with scabs. So that is some really good news and some great news. The graduate students, the graduate workers there at the University of New Mexico, they have won their union election, and good for them. Best of luck to you. But, here's the thing. All good news on the labor front. Pretty happy with a Friday with that. Still, you got the Amazon thing. And I am not going to let up on those workers killed in Illinois. I'm not going to let up on it because there's so much to this that needs to be addressed, which is why when I saw this piece over at Tech Policy Press absolutely had to get the writer over, which is why I've asked Deanna Enriquez to come talk with us. She's a PhD candidate over at Princeton University in sociology, but also a contributor over at Tech Policy Press. Deanna, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me tonight.
So I'm looking at this, and look, the mainstream media has already moved past this. It's the cost of doing business, I guess. I'm not. This is horrific. This is something that should have never happened. These workers should have never been threatened, which is what they're alleging, that to go home out of being disciplined or fired or whatever. And there should have been a safe place for them, and it wasn't. There are so many problems here, and thank goodness OSHA's looking into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is as we see more of the texts that came out with workers actually writing to their families saying, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, it exposes a lot of what I'm trying to cover in my research, which is just this ambiguity of all these roles that we toss around. So there's kind of this gig worker status, there's this contractor status, there's freelancers and everything else that's going on with these outsourced roles. And what it means for people trying to figure out what's going on, especially in a crisis, is they've just been so distanced from any sort of manager, any sort of protocol, really any sort of ability to negotiate and organize, that they end up floating in space. And this is the repercussion of that kind of outsourcing.
No, and this is one of those things I said the next day. In a union, this doesn't happen because those workers are empowered to go, you know what? This sounds bad. I'm going home to be with my family. And I shared an experience in my lifetime where, not the similar kind of danger, but something came up. I had to be home. I'm leaving. They threatened me. I'm still leaving. But because I had a union behind me, I didn't care. I'm going to take care of my responsibilities and my safety. And had these workers had a union, we're not talking about this.
Right. And I think one of the big problems that I was trying to point out is even as a whole bunch of workers in different kind of gig roles are trying to organize, the way that antitrust laws are set up in the US, unions are exempt from them. But because contractors are, especially by Uber and its Prop 22 campaigns, branded as these small business entrepreneurs, it can be legally argued that they are sort of a monopoly of some kind of service. So instead of allowing them to organize because they are workers, they're being treated as this horrible in-between ambiguous small business when it's convenient, worker when it's convenient thing that prevents them from organizing even when it's really basic.
No, so for me, if you're an independent contractor, truly an independent contractor, you had your cell phone with you. You were in contact with your family. You heard how bad it was, and you had the autonomy to go, screw this, I'm leaving. You had the autonomy to go, you know what, I'll come back when things are better. I'll come back when it's safe. Because, hey, I'm my own boss. I make my own decisions. I control my own work. This shows you don't. So how can you be a contractor given that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and in particular, it was interesting watching some of the comments on the article from Amazon workers that were different than the folks that I've been talking to when I was doing this research, where they were saying, oh, all these terms get tossed together. And to the workers, they know that a gig worker and a contractor and all these things are not the same, but legally we treat them as though they're this similar category that we just don't deal with at all. So what I was trying to argue and what I hope happens is that we add a little bit more clarity to who are these entrepreneurs and what does it actually mean if you're a small business? Because in reality, it's just sort of ignoring that these are workers in your warehouse obeying everything that a normal employee does. It's just a shrug of liability for the company, like Amazon.
And shifting the responsibility. So I'm looking at this and you go, those workers that were killed in that facility, is Amazon going to be liable for this? Or is this the responsibility of a third-party logistics company? Is this the individual's responsibility since they could technically be considered their own boss? Where does this fall? Does Amazon go, not our problem?
Yeah, I mean, what's sort of horrifying is I've been rereading Eric Loomis's History of American 10 Strikes, and I'm reading the cases about what happened with railroads. And it's essentially the same in these terms and service agreements that you sign when you're a gig worker or a contractor in these warehouses. It's saying essentially once you sign them and show up for work, you have done your own sort of risk assessment. And by you showing up and receiving payment, you've agreed to whatever risks are in your workplace.
Yeah.
Sorry, too bad.
No, and this is how we ended up with workers' compensation, because for the longest time they were saying, well, you knew the risks. You knew that if you took this dangerous job, you could lose a limb or fall into a pot of steel and evaporate. That was on you, not our problem. which is why they came up with this great compromise that stole your right to sue the company, but gave you a couple of bucks to help care for you, because there is some joint liability there. And I look at this, and you wrote about this in the piece. The building structure to me is a problem. You look at these enormous warehouses, and you go, I'm sorry, you're going to build that in Tornado Alley? That doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you find out that most of the workers, well, as you pointed out, aren't actual workers. So were they trained on where you go, how you evacuate, how you do any of that stuff in these massive facilities? And the answer clearly is no.
Yeah, I mean, I think it came up also in just some of the people responding, where it's like there needs to be some kind of protocol for retraining people. Where do you go if there's a natural disaster, especially in this year where there have been so many bad storms and it just seems to be getting worse? You don't have a protocol for it. What are these folks going to do?
Yeah, but for me, the bigger argument here, and one of the big arguments is, what we've done with working people in this country, how we've sliced them up and diced them up into categories and enticed them with carrots. While in the long haul, you end up seeing them being more vulnerable and being less rewarded. And again, this is why corporations do this. They wouldn't do it if it really did benefit you or any working person. They're doing it because it benefits them. It shields them from liability, which is why I look at our legislators, I look at people in Congress, I look at this administration and past, who have allowed this to continue. This didn't just happen. This is something that's been decades in the making, and we've got to do something about it now. So this should be a national call by all working people to protect us on the job. Whether you believe that we should have gig workers or not, you should be protected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think an extension of the research that I was doing that was related here is I'm looking at what happens with automation in the warehouses and just in general in Amazon supply chains. And there's all this story about how we're automating all these things, but mostly what came up constantly was that all these gig workers were sort of working around whatever weird coordinating automation was there. When it fell apart, they were the ones who picked up the pieces. So I think especially as these stories roll out that suggest that there aren't human workers in it, it makes it easier to ignore the folks in the warehouse because all you see is the seamless, I ordered something and it appeared 2 days later for most consumers. All of this is a story to just make it easier and easier and easier to pretend that they're not there. So it's harder for them to organize unless something changes in their status and they can be recognized as a union.
You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Deanna Enriquez. She's a PhD candidate at Princeton University in sociology. She's got a piece over at Tech Policy Press. Amazon workers deserve better is the title. We'll get links out on social media how you can check that out. Ultimately, though, doesn't this come down to the fact that in this country we've put profit above people for so long that we as working people are just used to it. We're used to the idea that hey, if a couple have to be injured or die, hey, at least you get your candle on time, or as I think you pointed out in the article, your dog treat on time. Isn't that really the end of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of these companies, Uber, Amazon, any of these folks hiring gig workers, prioritize a consumer experience that is so comfortable that it's really hard for people to give it up. It's comfortable and it's great. So why would you look past the comfort? Yeah. It's a big challenge.
Without understanding that there are actually people involved in this. And this is why I keep going back to I see some of these ads on TV of, look at all the money you can make. And they're making this glamorous lifestyle. And yet when I talk to these folks who do these jobs, it's not that glamorous lifestyle. It's figuring out how to shoulder the risks that come along with the minimal rewards. And this is another example. These are companies that don't care about these people. They just use them like any tool or, automated machine.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's been really interesting about this project is often when I ask people, how does this job compare to others, especially the folks who drive for Amazon Flex, where they're independent. So it's sort of that in that entrepreneurial scope of, this is a cool job. They tell me it's still better than when I had a manager breathing down my neck in my other jobs. It's sort of like they're choosing between really awful workplaces. So yeah, being alone might be better, but at what cost? And why can't we have something better?
That is an excellent point. You've got the choice between bad and worse. Yeah. And there are for working people in this country, there are no good options. And I say, unless you have the ability to bargain collectively to make things better. And that's where the unions, I think, have to take this and pick this up going forward. Do you think, as you're talking to people, that they get that there is another path, or are they just resigned to the fact that this is what it is, and I'm helpless given my realities.
I think there's a pretty big split, as it seems to be with most things in the U.S. right now, where some of the folks, especially in more rural areas, for whom this is a really great opportunity, and they make more money than they would for other things, really just sort of do buy into that I'm a small business, I'm an entrepreneur story. I found that people closer to urban areas were more likely to know other people who were also doing this job and were more likely to be working in some kind of community effort, whether it was a formal attempt to unionize or they're really big job boards online where people talk about issues that they encounter when they're trying to do delivery or they're dealing with a warehouse. So there is this kind of collective idea, especially in the internet, where people are trying to support each other. So I'm hoping that can help build a conversation about what would this job look like if it wasn't horrible? Because I think that what's sort of missing, especially without unions being part of the conversation of future of work in the way they used to be, is the people who get to design what future of work look like are the folks designing platforms like Amazon and Uber. Instead of unions saying, what does a good job look like? What would be sustainable for workers? And there really isn't space for them right now. That's a problem.
No, I see. I'm old enough to remember when warehouse jobs were actually good paying jobs you could support a family on, that you had really good health benefits and retirement security. I'm old enough to remember when those were actual reality. And you didn't have to pay influencers to say, oh, how much I love my job. And you didn't have to have Axios every other story saying how wonderful Amazon is. Because the one thing that Amazon has done wonderfully, and I give them credit for it, is they've done a massive PR campaign to say, see how wonderful we are. And I've often wondered if you took that money that you're wasting on PR and actually spend it on having a workforce that was actually your workforce, well trained, well paid and coordinated, maybe we wouldn't be in this moment.
Yeah, I think so too. Or I wonder. I hope.
No, and you're the sociology person. Are you surprised at the way that people have taken? Because I generally find that people view Amazon fairly positively because they do get the things that they want right there on the doorstep. It's in a neat little box and it's usually right and all of that. So they think, oh, it's wonderful. And they never look behind the curtain and they never see the machine. And look, I've talked to workers. You look at Bessemer, Alabama, 150% turnover rate. A lot of unhappy people, but you never hear those stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, for consumers, they've done a really excellent job in the design, making it seem like I can just think of something I want, type it into a search bar, and it's going to appear in my house. This is the most convenient, amazing thing, which is, of course, what all the retailers are saying. This is a huge problem. Help. We would like to be part of a community that's around you instead of sort of one in your imagination on the internet. It does mean that when that's sort of the design process and you really don't see any of the people in all of those places that have to be coordinated to make the search become the object outside your house, it's really hard to organize. I think even when I talk to people in my department who of course care about labor, sometimes they're surprised by what I'm describing. And I think that if there was a union, if it was easier to organize contract workers right now, I don't think it would be as much of a problem as it continues to be right now.
Yeah, so is your argument that we need, as I say, we need massive labor law changes, we need redefinitions of who a worker is, and because the laws that we're working under are what, 1935? We're talking 70, almost, well, 80, over 80 years old. They kind of need an update.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems we saw with the attempts to recategorize workers in California. So AB 5 was designed with gig workers at Uber and places like that in mind. And that was a huge problem for freelancers who are sort of operating like small businesses and need different constraints. But because we treat all these kind of contract outsourced jobs as the same thing, instead of having these categories where people can actually talk about what work looks like now, instead of assuming everyone has like a well-paying full-time job, which for most people is not real anymore, we have a lot of infighting among these folks who are outsourced workers, and that's a problem because instead of getting anywhere, we end up with the Prop 22 AB 5 fights in the middle of California instead of saying these are different types of workers, because they fundamentally are, and we need to be able to have language for that legally.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't see how you can be an independent contract worker in a warehouse. I just don't know how that works. Last question I've got for you. What are you hoping comes out of this article? And it's a fantastic article. I hope folks will take a look at it over at Tech Policy Press. Amazon Workers Deserve Better, written by Diana Enriquez. Diana, what are you hoping comes out of this?
I hope so. I'm hopeful that the FTC is looking at the way that antitrust laws are enforced against contractor unions. I think that's a big problem. I think contractors need to be able to form unions and organizations and not have it punished in the ways that it is. They are workers, they count as unions. They need to be exempt in the way that traditional unions are. So I hope that this is a moment where we can get there, because once we get there, we can make more progress in what we need to address.
No, there's a lot of work to be done. And for me, the outrage over what happened during this tornado, I'm sorry, it's not just a freak accident. The fact that it was a tornado came through and this was a big one and all of that shouldn't give you cover to say, oh, well, it was a freak accident. No, you should have these plans in place. You should be protecting people, and they should at least be able to say, hey, I want to go, and be able to go. That's simple. But Deanna, I appreciate you taking time for us. Great piece. I hope folks will take a look at it. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Good stuff, Deanna Enriquez. Look, we'll get this out on social media. You can take a look at it. I highly suggest taking a read. Love to hear your thoughts. You know anybody who works at Amazon? What do you think about this story? Is it okay? I don't think so. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around to listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to